Father's Day is rapidly approaching, and if your dad already has a garage full of tools and insists no more ties, then I suggest you try this episode's sponsor, Home Field Apparel. Home Field is a premium brand based in Indianapolis, creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed collegiate wear from over 150 colleges. They dive deep into each school's history, finding unique logos and mascots to craft nostalgic designs. So for a Father's Day gift to knock out the competition, why don't you take your dad down memory lane of his college glory years when he was big man on campus? You can do this by making sure you head to homefieldapparel.com. Again, that's homefieldapparel.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Today, in Part 5 of the best NFL teams of the 1970s, we're going to talk about the third best team, and that would be the Miami Dolphins. With their new head coach, Don Shula, leading the way, the 1970 Dolphins got off to a good start, winning 4 of their first 5 games. But they then lost 3 in a row, getting outscored in those 3 games by a whopping 87-17. They won their next 6 games to finish the season 10-4. They traveled to Oakland to face the Raiders, whom they had beaten earlier in the season. But the Raiders won the playoff game 21-14. Quarterback Bob Griese, fullback Larry Csonka, and receiver Paul Warfield made the Pro Bowl. Going into Week 12 of the 1971 season, the Miami Dolphins had the best record in the NFL, losing only 1 game. Although they stumbled a bit at the end, losing 2 of their last 3, they won their division with a 10-3-1 record. On Christmas Day in Kansas City, Miami beat the Kansas City Chiefs 27-24 in what many still consider the greatest playoff game ever played. Next, they would play the defending Super Bowl champion Baltimore Colts. Some thought the double overtime game against the Chiefs might have taken too much out of Miami, but they proved everyone wrong by whipping the Colts 21-0. In only their 6th season as a professional football team, Miami was on their way to the Super Bowl. But their inexperience showed in this game, and they were no match for the Dallas Cowboys, who beat them 24-3. Bob Griese, Larry Csonka, return man Mercury Morris, Paul Warfield, free safety Jake Scott, defensive end Bill Stanfill, kicker Garo Yepremian, and guard Larry Little made the Pro Bowl. Griese, Csonka, Warfield, and Larry Little made All-Pro. The 1972 season started with a rematch of the playoff game against the Chiefs. Miami won 20-10 and kept on rolling from there. In Week 9, they beat the Patriots 52-0. They finished the regular season with 14 wins and 0 losses. Although the Browns and Steelers gave the Dolphins all they could handle in the postseason, Miami was on their way to Los Angeles to play in their 2nd Super Bowl in a row. The Dolphins beat the Redskins 14-7 to complete the only perfect season in NFL history. Quarterback Earl Morrall, who took over for an injured Bob Griese, made the Pro Bowl, along with Csonka, Morris, Warfield, Bill Stanfill, middle linebacker Nick Bonacani, Larry Little, tackle Norm Evans, and safeties Dick Anderson and Jake Scott. Morrill, Larry Little, Bill Stanfill, and Dick Anderson made All-Pro. The Dolphins' 18-game win streak ended in Week 2 of the 1973 season. But they won 11 of their next 12 games to finish the season at 12-2. Some felt this team was even better than the 1972 undefeated team, and with good reason. During one 3-game stretch, they outscored their opponents 75-18. During another 3-game stretch, they outscored their opponents 75-7. They easily defeated the 10-4 Bengals in the playoffs 34-16. Next, they destroyed the Raiders in the AFC Championship game. Not only did this win put them in their 3rd Super Bowl in a row, but it was revenge since the Raiders had snapped the Dolphins' 18-game winning streak earlier in the season. Next up were the Minnesota Vikings in the Super Bowl, and it was no contest. Miami won 24-7 to win their 2nd Super Bowl in a row. Bob Griese, Larry Csonka, Mercury Morris, Paul Warfield, Jake Scott, Dick Anderson, Garo Yepremian, Bill Stanfill, Nick Bonacani, Larry Little, and center Jim Langer made the Pro Bowl. Csonka, Little, Warfield, Scott, and Anderson made All-Pro. Anderson also won the Defensive Player of the Year award. The 1974 Dolphins got off to a rocky start, getting upset in their opening game by the Patriots. They were 3-2 after 5 games, but then outscored their next 4 opponents 89-17. They finished the regular season with an 11-3 record and traveled to Oakland for the playoffs. In what many consider to be an even better game than the Dolphins vs. Chiefs playoff classic from 3 years earlier, the Raiders beat the Dolphins 28-26. Bob Griese, Larry Csonka, Paul Warfield, Jake Scott, Dick Anderson, Bill Stanfill, Jim Langer, Larry Little, Norm Evans, and guard Bob Kuechenberg made the Pro Bowl. Jake Scott, Larry Little, and Jim Langer made All-Pro. The 1975 Dolphins would be without the services of Larry Csonka, Paul Warfield, and Jim Kick, who joined the World Football League. Miami lost its opening game to the Raiders and then barely beat a bad New England Patriots team. But then the team got hot, as they always seem to do, winning their next 3 games by a combined score of 98-23. After 8 games, the Dolphins were 7-1, and it didn't seem to make any difference that they were without 2 All-Pro players in Csonka and Warfield. But they lost 3 of their next 6 games, so perhaps losing those players did make a difference after all. The Dolphins still finished the season with an impressive 10-4 record, but it wasn't good enough for a playoff spot. They lost both of the games they played against the Colts. Therefore, the 10-4 Colts won the tiebreaker for the division title. Normally, a 10-4 record would get you at least a wild card spot in the playoffs, but not this year, as the Bengals were the wild card team with an 11-3 record. Larry Little, Jake Scott, Jim Langer, and Bob Kuechenberg made the Pro Bowl. Little and Langer also made All-Pro. 1976 was a bit of a shocker for Dolphins fans, as the team had its first losing season since 1969, finishing 6-8. Along with Csonka and Kick, Mercury Morris was no longer with the team either, and their once dominant running game suffered greatly. In the past, it seemed that half of the AFC Pro Bowl team was from the Miami Dolphins team. only one player, Jim Langer, made the Pro Bowl this year. Miami bounced back strong in 1977 with a 10-4 record. The highlight of the season was a 55-14 beatdown of the Cardinals on Thanksgiving Day. But once again, their 10-4 record was not good enough for a playoff spot, losing the tiebreaker again to the Colts. The Raiders took the wild card spot with an 11-3 record. Bob Griese, Jim Langer, Bob Kuechenberg, and receiver Nat Moore made the Pro Bowl. Griese, Moore, and Langer also made All-Pro. Defensive end A.J. Dewey won the Rookie of the Year award. With an 8-5 record after 13 weeks of the 1978 season, it looked questionable for the Dolphins to make the playoffs. But they won their final 3 games and would play the Houston Oilers the playoffs at home. But the Miami offense never got in gear and lost 17-9. Bob Griese, Gary Permian, Bob Kuechenberg, Jim Langer, and running back Delvin Williams made the Pro Bowl. Kuechenberg and Williams also made All-Pro. Miami got off to a 4-0 start in 1979, but from that point on, they were a 500 team. They finished the regular season with a 10-6 record, which was good enough for first place in their division. But they were no match for the Steelers in the playoffs, losing 34-14. Return man Tony Nathan, strong safety Tim Foley, linebacker Kim Bocamper, and nose tackle Bob Baumhauer made the Pro Bowl. Larry Csonka, who spent the last 3 seasons with the New York Giants, rejoined the Dolphins in '79 and won the Comeback Player of the Year award. The bottom line for the Dolphins, their regular season record in the 1970s was 104 wins, only 39 losses, and 1 tie. Their postseason record was 8 wins and 5 losses. They won 5 division titles, 3 AFC titles, and 2 Super Bowl titles. Until next week, hope you enjoyed, take care, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Darren Hayes, host of the Pigskin Dispatch and Jersey Dispatch podcast. I hope you've enjoyed another great episode here on Sports History Network. Now, speaking of sports history, this episode was brought to you by Firefly Books, and they have 2 great ones for you this summer. For basketball fans, they have the NBA 75, the definitive history by author Dave Zarum, who's appeared on our Jersey Dispatch podcast recently. He tells about the experience, the thrilling journey of the NBA, from its humble beginnings to its modern glory. Uncover the untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. This isn't just a book, it's courtside seats to over 75 years of NBA history. And for the golf enthusiasts, swing into The Golf Round I'll Never Forget by Matt Adams. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. From Garcia's triumph at the 2017 Masters to Nicklaus' miraculous 1986 comeback, it's the closest you'll get to walking the fairways with golf's greatest. Get your summer read on. Grab a copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available online or at your favorite bookstore.